Hello and welcome to episode 11 of The Wind-Thieved Hat. I've enjoyed every one of the conversations I've had in the making of this series, but I think this is one of my favourites. It's with the sculptor Ivan Black. It's sort of the untold story of most artists' lives, isn't it? I think unless you are actually try and make work and make a living by it, or live with somebody who does, you don't really appreciate, the wilderness that people can spend a lot of time in, and it requires quite strong reserves, doesn't it?
It's brutal. It's brutal, and I think the prerogative to keep earning money to feed the family and maybe living here as well. The fact that there aren't like unlimited other avenues that can earn you a living. It's probably a factor in my perseverance, that sense of responsibility to the family.
Had you lived somewhere else where it was easier to slip into
maybe
paying work than you might have?
Maybe, although I don't know that I'm a very good employee. Not that I wasn't a bad employee, but not that it's something that I've ever felt happy or comfortable doing.
Yes. How important is your relationship in sustaining you through?
Massively important. My wife has been just so patient. And she comes from a family of high achievers who are all very successful, very wealthy. And she's lived with me now. In poverty for years. We've been supported by her family as well, so that's a factor. They helped us to buy our house, and so that can't be discounted. That's a big part of the story as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the work, specifically. So I recently read the Walter Isaacson's biography of Leonardo da Vinci.
Right.
I don't know if you've come across this.
No,
It's for a biography of Leonardo da Vinci. It's a bit of a page turner. It's very reasonable. Yeah. But I was reading this and I was thinking about coming down here, and it struck me that there were some similarities between you and da Vinci.
Right.
Obviously, he wasn't available for the podcast. But no, I suppose in the sense that he was a man who seemed fascinated by nature and by patterns in nature, and by his curiosity to explore and investigate the natural environment led to some of the techniques and approaches that he brought to his art. Yeah. And I think looking at your work, one immediately sees forms that we're familiar with through scientific textbooks and this kind of thing. Am I barking up the right tree here?
Well, I think I'm probably going to have to disappoint you a little bit, just because I wouldn't say that I outwardly, look for inspiration in nature or natural geometry. Although, I don't know. It's difficult to explain. But I think, a bit like Da Vinci, maybe I am fascinated by patterns and also by working in different disciplines. So by maybe I'm creatively easily bored, I suppose. I always want to find ways to maintain my interest. But as far as the patterns go, I think that my work sort of evolves rather than, I don't look at, it's probably quite complicated really, isn't it? I do look at geometry, and I look at geometry in scientific textbooks and sacred geometry and things, but in quite an abstract way. I don't kind of generally look at it and think, right, I'm going to make a sculpture based on that pattern. It's more like absorbing the kind of inspiration. Maybe the same is true with nature, but it's more like in a piece of work, the way the whole initial my first kinetic mechanism came about was that I saw something that I thought was interesting, and that's something that I'd made, and then decided to extrapolate on that to make the next piece. And it's been like that, like a process of evolution. So each piece would almost, focus in on one element of it that was not the central element of the sculpture, but that I thought could be made the central element of the next sculpture. So the sculptures have evolved, and I've always been looking for things that resonate with me, and it's been a happy coincidence that they obviously resonate with other people as well. So there's something about some of the patterns that we are drawn to or that we respond to, and we don't necessarily know why.
The golden ratio.
Yeah, for instance. That was interesting. That's probably the only thing where I did take a kind of classic piece of kind of a geometric, iconic design and try to turn it into a kinetic sculpture. And that then led to another whole set of new designs, which are related but dissimilar.
Yes. Another thing about the work is, by virtue of being kinetic sculpture, there's a sort of element of time, isn't there?
Yes.
They're like animations. There is this dynamism, and I was showing my kids this morning your work on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I think what they were enjoying, they're 8 and 11, they're still quite young. What they were enjoying about it was there is an apparent sort of sequence of motion, but then there is a different sequence of motion, and there's almost like a mini narrative in the movement. Yeah,
and there's a performance element, I think, as well. And the videos that have had the most interest on Instagram have nearly always been the ones where I'm playing with the sculpture. I don't know what it is about that makes it. I guess it's the human element, isn't it? But yeah, the narrative element and the surprise, I think, is a key thing. And I think
as you had that initial moment of surprise all those years ago.
Maybe I've spent the rest of my career trying to recapture that, or to try to kind of impart that to my audience, if you like, to give them that kind of same feeling of pleasure. To give pleasure, is that sufficiently lofty ambition, in one's eye? I don't know.
I think it is. I think it is. It is that little moment of pleasure, isn't it? When something happens in a way that is unpredictable. And Instagram's interesting, isn't it? Because you've obviously been making work since before Instagram. And now Instagram, in some respects, is the reason I'm here, because I first saw your work there, I think. How is your relationship with social media?
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? It's an interesting and surprising fact that my stuff just works particularly well on social media. They're short little clips of moving, dynamic, interesting visual effects that people really respond to. But I only actually went on Instagram maybe 3 years ago. I first opened my account, and it was my sister who talked me into doing it. She works in the arts. She's actually got a gallery in London now. I didn't really want to do it. I certainly didn't want to spend time on it. So she said, just send me a bunch of photos and I'll post one every day. And then the following grew very slowly at first. This time last year, I think I had 2,500 followers, which felt like a nice, I had a lot of loyal people who always really liked the things I was posting and so on. But then it just exploded, one thing went viral, and then suddenly the followers were going up just at an incredible pace. Now we're up to 100,000 or something a year later, and that's just been by virtue of it just took on a momentum of its own, and the things got shared. Sculptures went viral. Not really through any kind of calculated approach on our part. It's just
there was no social media strategy.
No, not at all. No, although once it starts, you kind of learn how to keep that momentum going and so on, and it has had a transformative effect on the amount of business that I'm getting now and interest coming in. yeah. But on the downside, it's a huge distraction, isn't it? And yeah, and through that and the complicated, and big projects that I'm working on, I find myself, not doing the core part of my creative work, which is just being in the workshop, kind of experimenting, making new things, or certainly not nearly as much as I would like, getting further and further away from that, time of creative freedom that kick-started the whole career.
And do you have a regular sort of schedule? How do you work?
Well, because I do so many different things in my work, it's hard to have a very regular schedule. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of, design work for big projects, kind of mechanical design and motors, and talking to structural engineers and doing drawings on software and so on, and it's a very important and key part of the job, and not without its kind of interest from the point of view of problem solving and design and so on. But I always work from sort of 9 to 5, and I've got a couple of people helping now.
Okay, that's good.
Which has been key, really, to just being able to deal with a sudden surge of interest and expansion of the business. It's grown by turnover has gone up by probably 1,000% in a year, and it's like I don't know if that can continue.
Do you think that's driven by the Instagram success? Is it?
Instagram and Facebook, yeah. There's quite a few. I don't know if you've seen those compilation videos have been made of various sculptures, and some of those have had staggering amounts of views, like 15 million views, and it's crazy to think about, and amazing to think. I mean, it's too early to say that this can continue. Who knows? But at the moment, it feels like, can it really be that from this quiet little corner of Pembrokeshire, that we might have been able to actually successfully create, a business that's completely international now. The inquiries are coming from all over the world, and it feels like maybe I don't need to travel as much as I have done in the past. The struggle has always been not to make work that people wanted to buy. The struggle has been getting the people who wanted to buy the work to see it, somehow getting it in front of those people. And my work has always been well appreciated, and I've always had, clients and so on. But to grow that, or to find new clients, was always the challenge.
But now the internet gives you that level of exposure.
That you unbelievable exposure. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah,
I'm pleased to hear it.
Yeah, but now I need to find a way to make it work for me. To make it work from the point of view of not kind of stifling my creativity in a way, because it's so all-encompassing and intense. When something is going crazy on Instagram, it's hard to look away.
Yes.
And it's a bit overwhelming as well, Sometimes it's made me feel slightly sick almost, it's like too intense. It's
vertigo.
Like we had to turn off the notifications on, when things started going viral, and, the iPad would just be pinging every minute, and hard to look away, and so that's something I haven't completely mastered yet, is how to find that balance.
Yes, I'm not sure anybody has particularly. The last interview I recorded was with Dominic Wilcox, who's had a lot of success on the, if you call it success, but his stuff gets a lot of traction. And he finds it very difficult to sort of disentangle himself from it, I think, at times.
Yeah, I do. Although I let my wife does most of the social media interaction.
So So how do you plan to preserve your creative space?
Yes, it's difficult, isn't it? Yeah, I think to probably get stuff manufactured elsewhere would be one way of doing it.
Yes.
So especially the big complicated commissions, that I can end up spending months planning and designing and making and so on, organising. With the social media, just to try to take a bit of a step back from it, and sometimes it's a double-edged sword. Like when we recently posted a video of the light, which you've seen, I think. I was really busy at the time. We posted the video of the light not in an attempt to kind of get loads of interest, but that was what happened. It just went mad.
Nebula Hive.
Nebula Ellipse. It's still at the top of my Instagram. And then suddenly there was an endless stream of inquiries, and they all need to be responded to. And suddenly it's like, God, I really didn't actually need that extra work. I'm trying to concentrate on one thing, and suddenly there's all of these offers I can't refuse coming in.
And it's very difficult when you've been through a period where it's been tough financially. And then you're in a period where you have offers to say no, isn't it?
Yeah, but I have had to say no. I've been turning down a lot of stuff, but it's often speculative things. People want you to propose work,
right?
And
yes,
and 90% of the time it doesn't lead anywhere.
Yes. That's another thing about the internet, isn't it? One thing that my wife finds is that there are quite a few people who would exploit artists, and the internet gives them quick channels into.
Yeah, but it's not just the internet. I think that's just it was like that before.
Fair point.
And actually, I think the internet in some ways certainly allowed me to find my own routes to market. Which is something I was doing anyway, but it suddenly made it turbocharged it, or made it possible.
Yes.
To sell direct to clients, and for clients to find me, and
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the future, that sort of hazy thing that is in front of all of us. Is there a particular kind of work, or do you have ambitions about where you'd like to take things, or what you'd like to be doing?
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think that one day I would like to move on, in a way, to kind of draw a line under this period and take on a new challenge. And I've fantasized about that in the past, particularly when things have been, difficult, and I've felt like I've fallen out of love of my kind of self-imposed boundaries, if you like, because I have imposed a lot of restrictions on how I work, as part of that kind of determination to have a kind of holistic body of work, and also to force myself to be inventive, because I think that when you work from a limited palette, it forces you to find interesting things to do with that. And we didn't touch that much on the inspiration side of things, apart from a couple of words about nature and geometry and so on. But I think actually electronic music, which is something that was a big part of my youth, has been quite an inspiration.
That's interesting.
Yeah, in the sort of minimalism, and especially in the early days, there was a sort of limited number of synthesizers that were used, and the way that people could be so infinitely inventive with it. And also, the people that I admired, both in the arts and in music, are the ones who had managed to kind of create a language all of their own that was very identifiable to them. I think I've sort of wanted to achieve that myself, whether I have or not is for someone else to judge, but that was inspiring to me. But yeah, I think one day I might like to move away and try something that's a bit freer, a bit creatively freer, but maybe that's a vain hope.
Yes.
Maybe it's just not not in my nature, so time will tell.
Or maybe there is another eureka moment around the corner that casts you off into a different direction, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe it requires to work in materials that are not so easily kind of constrained into those sort of perfect, forms that I have employed so much in my work.
Yes.
So, yeah. I'd like to do that one day. And I'd like to also, just find the time to... I hope that if I do achieve a level of success, that then it might give me the luxury to be able to retreat a bit, or get my stuff manufactured professionally, the things that can be, and then spend my own time making my handmade, going back more to, because a lot of my stuff now is part kind of cut by CNC machines and so on, and engineered components and so on. So it'd be nice to go back to making more of the handmade kind of, crafted sculptures. But at the moment I don't know really. I think there's a lot of potential avenues to explore. I haven't really focused on one entirely. Yes,
there's still work to be made in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, it's been really lovely talking to you, Ivan. I really appreciate our conversation.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you very much. Fascinating to hear your journey.
I'm glad. I wasn't sure if it would be an interesting story or not.
Absolutely, yeah, really good. And it's been lovely to take a look in the studio as well.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So there we are, Ivan Black. What a gentle and inspiring human being. I've got a few more episodes up my sleeve and I've not decided yet which to release next. So if you want to find out, then please subscribe and stay tuned. But for now, thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.